Victoria Hayes stood in the rain outside Morrison and Associates law firm, clutching her worn messenger bag and trying to gather courage. The building towered above her, all glass and steel, so different from the colorful community arts center, where she spent her days helping children express themselves through painting and sculpture. She had received the call 3 days ago. Her Uncle Benjamin had passed away, and she needed to attend the reading of his will. Uncle Benjamin had been a distant figure in her life. A real estate mogul who had built an empire from nothing, he had always seemed too busy for family gatherings, too focused on his next deal to remember birthdays or holidays. Victoria had seen him maybe 5 times in her entire life. The last time was at her mother's funeral 4 years ago, where he had stood apart from everyone, silent and uncomfortable with grief. She pushed through the revolving doors and entered, a lobby that smelled of expensive cologne and fresh flowers. The receptionist directed her to the 14th floor, where a secretary with perfect hair and a practiced smile led her to a conference room with windows overlooking the city. The view was breathtaking, but Victoria felt nothing but dread. Mr. Morrison was a man in his 60s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He gestured for her to sit in one of the leather chairs that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Victoria perched on the edge, her hands folded in her lap. "Thank you for coming, Miss Hayes. I know this must be difficult for you." Victoria nodded, unsure what to say. She had not been close enough to her uncle to feel the crushing weight of grief, but death always left its mark. It reminded her of her own mortality, of time slipping through fingers like sand. "Your uncle left very specific instructions regarding his estate." Mr. Morrison opened a thick folder and pulled out several documents. "The assets are substantial. Approximately $40 million in real estate holdings, investments, and liquid assets." Victoria felt her breath catch. $40 million. The number seemed impossible, unreal. She thought of her tiny apartment, her student loan debt, the art center that was 3 months behind on rent and facing closure. $40 million could change everything. However, there is a condition. Of course there was. Nothing in life came without strings attached. Your uncle believed strongly in the institution of marriage. He felt it provided stability and purpose. Therefore, he has stipulated that in order to inherit, you must be married within 3 months of his death. The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. Married. In 3 months. She was 23 years old. She had never even had a serious relationship. Her last boyfriend had been in college, and that had ended when he decided to backpack through Europe without her. "That is absurd," Victoria said, finding her voice. "People do not get married just to inherit money." "This is not the Victorian era." Mr. Morrison nodded sympathetically. "I understand your frustration. However, your uncle anticipated this reaction. He left a letter for you." He slid an envelope across the polished table. Victoria recognized her uncle's bold handwriting on the front. Her hands trembled as she opened it and began to read. The letter explained that Benjamin Hayes had spent his life building an empire but had forgotten to build a family. He had been married once briefly in his 20s. It had ended in divorce, and he had never tried again. He had poured everything into his work, into accumulating wealth, and in the end, he realized he had no one to share it with. He had watched. Victoria, from afar, seen her dedication to helping others through art therapy, noticed how she chose passion over profit. He did not want her to make his mistakes. He wanted her to have both security and love. The marriage requirement was his way of ensuring she would not end up alone like him. But he had gone further. He had selected a candidate. "I have chosen Dr. Julian Thornfield as a suitable match for you. He is brilliant, successful, and from a good family. He has agreed to consider this arrangement. The choice, ultimately, is yours." Victoria looked up from the letter, her mind reeling. Dr. Julian Thornfield. She knew that name. Everyone in Boston knew that name. He was the neurosurgeon who had revolutionized treatment protocols for brain trauma. He was also known for being absolutely ruthless. Nurses called him the Ice King. Patients feared his brutal honesty. He had saved countless lives, but no one claimed he had done it with warmth or kindness. "He has agreed to meet with you, Mr. Morrison," said. "The appointment is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon at Boston General Hospital. You do not have to go. You can walk away from all of this. But if you want the inheritance, you need to be married within 3 months, to someone of good character and stable income. Your uncle suggested Dr. Thornfield, but the final choice is yours." Victoria sat in silence, processing everything. $40 million. The art center could continue. She could expand the programs, reach more children, hire proper staff. She could pay off her student loans, help her younger brother Thomas finish college without working 3 jobs. She could have security for the first time in her life. But marriage. To a stranger. To a man known for his cold heart. "I need time to think," Victoria whispered. "You have 3 months total. But Dr. Thornfield will only wait 1 week for your decision. He is a very busy man." Victoria left the law firm in a daze. She walked through the rain without really seeing where she was going. Her phone buzzed with a text from Thomas, asking if she wanted to grab dinner, but she could not face him yet, not until she decided what to do. She found herself at the art center without realizing she had walked there. The building was old and drafty, with peeling paint and a leaky roof. But inside, it was full of life. Children's artwork covered every wall, explosions of color and imagination. This place had saved her after her mother died. It gave her purpose when she felt lost. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly owner, was in her office surrounded by bills. She looked up when Victoria entered, and her expression said everything. They both knew the center was dying. Without a miracle, they would close by Christmas. $40 million would be a miracle. That night, Victoria lay awake in her apartment, staring at the ceiling. She thought about her uncle's letter, about his regrets and loneliness. She thought about her mother, who had always told her to follow her heart, but also to be practical. She thought about all the children who needed the art center, who needed a safe place to express themselves and heal. And she thought about Dr. Julian Thornfield, the Ice King, the ruthless surgeon who saved lives but supposedly had no heart of his own. By morning, she had made her decision. She would meet him. She would listen to what he had to say, and then she would decide if she could go through with this impossible arrangement. The meeting was set for 2 in the afternoon. Victoria dressed carefully in a simple navy dress and cardigan, pulling her dark hair back in a neat bun. She wanted to look professional, serious. She was not some naive girl who could be manipulated. She was a woman making a calculated decision about her future. Boston General Hospital was even more intimidating than the law firm. It bustled with activity, with doctors and nurses moving with purpose through sterile white corridors. Victoria asked for directions to Dr. Thornfield's office and was directed to the top floor, to the neurosurgery wing. His secretary, an efficient woman named Ms. Chen, told her to wait. Victoria sat in the reception area, surrounded by medical journals and diplomas on the walls. Each one belonged to Julian Thornfield, documenting his brilliance, Harvard Medical School, Johns Hopkins residency, awards and publications and achievements that proved he was at the top of his field. After 15 minutes, the door to his office opened. Dr. Thornfield stood in the doorway, and Victoria felt her breath catch for the second time in 2 days. He was not what she expected. The photos in medical journals had not prepared her for the reality of him. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with dark hair that was slightly too long and eyes that were an unusual shade of gray, like storm clouds before rain. He wore surgical scrubs and a white coat, and there was something almost predatory about the way he moved, like a big cat assessing potential prey. Miss Hayes. His voice was deep, controlled, revealing nothing. Please come in. Victoria stepped into Julian Thornfield's office and immediately felt the temperature drop. Not literally, but the atmosphere was cold, sterile, devoid of warmth. The space was immaculate. Everything had its place. Medical journals lined the shelves in perfect order. A desk sat in the center with nothing on it except a laptop and a single pen. No photographs, no plants. No evidence that a human being actually worked here. Julian gestured to a chair across from his desk. Victoria sat, keeping her back straight and her hands folded in her lap. She refused to show how intimidated she felt. He studied her for a long moment, those gray eyes analyzing her like she was a patient on his operating table. Victoria met his gaze steadily, even though her heart hammered in her chest. Your uncle spoke highly of you. His voice was flat, clinical. He believed we would be compatible. Compatible. The word hung in the air between them like something toxic. This was not about love or romance or even basic human connection. This was a transaction, a business arrangement, dressed up in wedding clothes. Did you know my uncle well? Victoria asked, proud that her voice did not shake. Well enough. Julian leaned back in his chair, still watching her with those unsettling eyes. He consulted with me 5 years ago when he had a minor stroke. We stayed in contact afterward. He valued my opinion on various matters, and he thought arranging a marriage between strangers was a good idea. A ghost of something crossed Julian's face. Perhaps amusement, perhaps annoyance. It was impossible to tell. He thought ensuring your future security was a good idea. The method may be unconventional, but the intention was sound. You talk about this like it is a medical procedure, Victoria said, feeling a spark of anger. Like we are discussing treatment options. Not our lives, aren't we? Julian tilted his head slightly. You need money. I need something your uncle left for me in his will. A marriage of convenience serves both our purposes. Emotion would only complicate matters. What did he leave you? Victoria demanded. What could possibly be worth entering a fake marriage? For the first time, Julian's expression shifted. Something raw and painful flickered in his eyes before the mask slammed back down. That is between your uncle and me. It does not concern you. How can it not concern me? We are talking about getting married. On paper only. Julian stood and walked to the window, his back to her. We would live separately. Maintain separate lives. After a suitable period, perhaps 2 years, we divorce quietly. You get your inheritance. I get what I need. No one is harmed. Victoria stared at his back, at the rigid line of his shoulders. This man was an island unto himself, isolated and unreachable. She wondered what had made him this way, what had frozen his heart so completely, before she could respond. There was a knock on the door. A woman in her 40s entered without waiting for permission. She wore a sharp business suit and carried a tablet like a weapon. She stopped short when she saw Victoria. Julian, you have surgery in 20 minutes. The woman's voice was brisk, efficient. Dr. Patel is already prepping the patient. I am aware, Rebecca. Julian did not turn around. Miss Hayes and I are discussing a personal matter. The woman, Rebecca, raised an eyebrow and looked at Victoria with open curiosity. This must be the infamous arranged bride. She extended her hand. Rebecca Chang, hospital administrator, and apparently the only person allowed to interrupt Dr. Thornfield. Nice to meet you. Victoria shook her hand, surprised by the warmth in Rebecca's grip. Nice to meet you, too. Rebecca turned back to Julian. For what it is worth, your mother called again. She wants you to come to dinner this Sunday. Tell her I am busy. You are always busy. Rebecca's voice softened. She is your mother, Julian. Eventually, you will have to talk to her. Julian's shoulders tensed. "That will be all, Rebecca." The administrator sighed but nodded. She gave Victoria a sympathetic look before leaving. In the silence that followed, Victoria felt the weight of all the things left unsaid. "You have family," Victoria said quietly. "Yet, you live like you are alone in the world. Family is complicated." Julian finally turned to face her. His expression was carefully blank, but something haunted lurked in his gray eyes. "We are not here to discuss my personal life. If we are going to get married, even on paper, I think I deserve to know something about you." Julian checked his watch. "I have surgery in 18 minutes. We can continue this discussion later if you decide to proceed with the arrangement. My attorney will draw up a contract outlining the terms. You should have your own lawyer review it." Victoria stood frustrated by his coldness. "How can you be so clinical about this? This is marriage we are talking about. Even if it is fake, it still means something. Does it?" Julian walked to the door and opened it. "To me, it is a legal document, nothing more." "Then I feel sorry for you," Victoria said, surprising herself with her boldness. "You may be brilliant, Dr. Thornfield. You may save lives every day, but you are missing the most important part of being human." "And what is that?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Connection, feeling something for another person, caring about more than just yourself." For a long moment they stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. Then Julian's expression shuddered completely. "I have surgery. My secretary will contact you about the contract." He walked out, leaving Victoria standing alone in his cold, empty office. Over the next week, Victoria met with lawyers. She talked to her younger brother Thomas, who was studying engineering at Boston University. She did not tell him about the marriage requirement. She just said Uncle Benjamin had left her money for the art center. Thomas was thrilled. He had always worried about her working at the struggling nonprofit, barely making ends meet. The contract arrived by courier. It was 12 pages long and outlined everything in excruciating detail. Separate residences. No expectation of physical intimacy. Public appearances required at least once a month to maintain the appearance of a real marriage. Financial arrangements clearly defined. Divorce after 2 years, with neither party making claims against the other. It was the most unromantic document Victoria had ever read. But it also represented security, freedom, the ability to help people without worrying about money. She signed it. The wedding was scheduled for 3 weeks later at Boston City Hall. A simple civil ceremony, no guests except for the required witnesses. Victoria wore a cream-colored dress she had bought at a department store. Thomas asked why he could not attend, and Victoria made up an excuse about it being a small, private affair. Julian wore a dark suit and looked like he was attending a board meeting, not his own wedding. The ceremony lasted 8 minutes. When the official pronounced them husband and wife, Julian did not kiss her. He simply nodded, shook her hand like they had just closed a business deal, and led her to his car. That evening, Victoria sat in her apartment alone, a gold band on her finger, feeling heavier than it should. She had done it. She was married to a stranger, to a man with ice in his veins and walls around his heart. She wondered if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. But 2 days later, everything changed. Victoria was at the art center, working with a group of children on a mural project, when she felt a sudden, sharp pain in her chest. It came out of nowhere, stealing her breath and making her vision blur. She tried to call out, but no sound came. She collapsed, and the world went dark. She woke in a hospital bed, surrounded by beeping machines and white walls. But what shocked her most was the figure sitting beside her bed, head in his hands, looking more human than she had ever seen him. Julian Thornfield sat vigil beside his wife, and for the first time, the ice had cracked. Victoria opened her eyes slowly, Disoriented by the bright lights and antiseptic smell, her chest felt tight, and monitors beeped steadily beside her bed. But what captured her attention was the man sitting in the chair next to her, his face buried in his hands, his shoulders curved in a posture of complete defeat. Julian. He looked up at the sound of her movement, and Victoria saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. Fear. Raw, unfiltered fear that made him look years, younger and infinitely more vulnerable. "You are awake." His voice was rough, like he had been shouting or crying or both. "Thank God." "What happened?" Victoria whispered. Her throat felt dry and scratchy. "Panic attack." Julian moved closer, his hand hovering near hers but not quite touching, combined with stress-induced hyperventilation. "Your director at the art center called me when you collapsed. You were unconscious for almost an hour. You came." Victoria could not keep the surprise out of her voice. "Of course I came." Julian finally took her hand, his grip surprisingly gentle. "You are my wife, on paper only," Victoria reminded him, echoing his own words from their first meeting. Something passed across his face, an emotion too complex to name. "The contract does not cover medical emergencies. That is not why I came." "Then why?" Julian was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing absent circles on her palm. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "When I was 10 years old, I found my mother unconscious on the bathroom floor. She had suffered a brain aneurysm. I called for help, but I did not know what to do. I just sat there, holding her hand, watching her slip away. The ambulance came too late. She died 3 days later without ever waking up." Victoria's heart clenched. "Julian, I am so sorry." "My father blamed me. Not directly, but I could see it in his eyes. If I had noticed the symptoms earlier, if I had called for help sooner, if I had been smarter, better, more aware." He looked at their joined hands. "I became a neurosurgeon because I never wanted to feel that helpless again. I learned everything I could about the brain, about saving lives, about being in control. But you cannot control everything," Victoria said softly. "No." His gray eyes met hers, and they were swimming with unshed tears. "When Rebecca called me and said you had collapsed, I was in the middle of surgery. I should have stayed. I should have finished. But all I could think about was being 10 years old again, losing someone while I stood by helplessly. I scrubbed out and came immediately." "We barely know each other," Victoria whispered. "I know." Julian's voice cracked slightly. "That is what terrifies me most. We have been married 3 weeks, and somehow you have become important, essential. This was supposed to be a business arrangement, nothing more." "What changed?" Victoria asked. "You did." Julian reached up and gently pushed a strand of hair from her face. "You, with your ridiculous optimism and your passion for helping children and your refusal to let me hide behind my walls. You made me feel something again, and I do not know what to do with that." Before Victoria could respond, the door burst open. A woman swept in, tall and elegant with the same dark hair and gray eyes as Julian. But where his face was all hard edges and control, hers was open and expressive. "Julian, what is going on? I got your message about being at the hospital." The woman stopped short when she saw Victoria in the bed. "Oh, you must be the wife." "Catherine." Julian stood, his walls immediately going back up. "You did not need to come." "Of course I needed to come. You sent a cryptic text about a medical emergency." The woman turned to Victoria and smiled warmly. "I am Catherine Thornfield, Julian's sister, the one he has been avoiding for the past 5 years." "I have not been avoiding you," Julian said stiffly. "You have not returned my calls in 3 months. That is avoiding." Catherine pulled up another chair and sat down, completely ignoring her brother's discomfort. So, Victoria Hayes, the woman brave enough to marry the Ice King himself. Tell me everything. Over the next hour, Victoria learned more about Julian Thornfield than she had in all their previous interactions. Catherine was warm and talkative, filling the hospital room with stories about their childhood. She painted a picture of Julian before tragedy struck. A boy who loved puzzles and books, who was gentle with animals, who cried at sad movies. He built me a treehouse when I was 7, Catherine said, her eyes soft with memory. Spent the entire summer on it. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, with windows and curtains and a sign that said, Catherine's Castle. Julian looked uncomfortable with this trip down memory lane. You were supposed to be resting, he said to Victoria, clearly trying to change the subject. I am resting, Victoria replied. I am just also listening to fascinating stories about your past. Before Catherine could continue, there was a sharp knock on the door. A man entered without waiting for permission. He was in his 50s, with silver hair and an expensive suit. He looked at Julian with barely concealed hostility. Dr. Thornfield, the man's voice dripped with false courtesy. I heard your new wife had a medical scare. How unfortunate, Mr. Wolfe. Julian's entire body went rigid. This is a private room. You were not invited. Richard Wolfe. Victoria recognized the name from the news. He was a real estate developer, known for his aggressive business tactics and his rivalry with her late uncle. I came to express my concern. Wolfe's smile did not reach his eyes. And to remind you that your marriage to Miss Hayes is built on very shaky ground. Your uncle's will can be contested, especially if the marriage is not genuine. It is genuine, Julian said coldly. Is it? Wolfe pulled out his phone and showed them a photograph. It was Julian entering his own apartment building, alone, late at night. The timestamp showed it was from last week. You maintain separate residences. You barely see each other. A judge would see right through this arrangement. Get out, Julian growled. The inheritance could be redistributed to other family members or business partners, people who actually deserve it. Wolfe pocketed his phone. Think about it carefully, Dr. Thornfield. Maintaining this charade could cost you everything. He left, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. Victoria felt her chest tighten again, but this time it was not from panic, it was from anger. Someone was actively working to destroy their arrangement, to take away the money that could save the art center and help so many children. We need to move in. Together, she said firmly. Both Julian and Catherine turned to stare at her. What? Julian asked. You heard him. We maintain separate residences. We barely see each other. If we want this to be convincing, we need to actually live together. Act like a real married couple. The contract, Julian started. Forget the contract. Victoria sat up straighter, ignoring the way her head spun slightly. If Richard Wolfe wants a war, we will give him one. But we do it together, as actual partners. Julian looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then, slowly, he nodded. All right, move in with me. Let us show everyone that this marriage is real. Catherine clapped her hands together, delighted. Oh, this is going to be good. The Ice King learns to share his space. I cannot wait to watch this unfold. Julian shot his sister a dark look, but Victoria saw the corner of his mouth twitch, almost like he wanted to smile. As Victoria was discharged that evening, Julian held her arm carefully, guiding her to his car with a gentleness that contradicted his reputation. Catherine walked beside them, chattering about organizing a proper family dinner. For the first time since this arrangement began, Victoria felt something shift between them. The ice was melting, the walls were cracking, and beneath it all, something real was beginning to grow, something worth fighting for. As they drove through the city lights, Victoria glanced at Julian's profile and wondered if her uncle had known. This would happen, if he had seen something neither of them could see. A possibility for connection between two lonely souls who had forgotten how to let anyone in. The fight was just beginning, but for the first time, Victoria felt ready to face it. Not alone, but with someone standing beside her, even if he was still learning how to stand close.